Hello everyone, I'm Terry Crow. I'm the president of Starfish Performance Consultants and the creator of Progress to Success Management. Welcome back to week 3 of our online coaching and training program. Delighted to have you back here with me, and I hope that you have had a wonderful week. Well, as we dive into week 3 of this training, we're going to be talking about the second domain in Progress to Success Management. Now, recall that Progress to Success Management, it's an integrated design that is intended to help you cultivate purposeful progress that will give you remarkable results, out of the ballpark results, that will help you put yourself on the path to success as you define it. Now, last week we talked about the first domain, which was manage yourself. We always start with ourselves, and that's the stance from which we begin in Progress to Success Management. This week we're going to be talking about the second domain in Progress to Success Management, and that is how you manage conversation. You know, I really enjoy talking about this particular domain, and one of the reasons that I enjoy it so much is that I think it is so important for us as leaders and managers and business professionals to be able to develop an expertise within this domain. I certainly have found that through the years, being a manager myself and a leader and executive, that managing conversation was absolutely essential for me to be able to feel some sort of effectiveness in whatever role it was that I happened to be playing at the time. In my role as president of Starfish Performance Consultants, managing conversation is absolutely crucial. I've certainly found that as I've coached and trained many leaders and executives over the decades that I've been in the business of training and development and coaching, that managing conversation has always been sort of a make or break thing for whether or not in determining the effectiveness of leaders. So I know that this is an absolutely critical part of the 3 domains within Progress to Success Management. And you know, when you think about it, conversation and management and leadership, they all blend in together. And management exists in the domain of language. It's how we get things done, is through language and through interactions that happen on a daily basis. So how we go about managing conversation, it's what management and leadership is all about. It's the domain in which it exists. I also have found that when we talk about managing conversation, when I look at and ponder what I hear feedback from the different leaders and managers, business entrepreneurs that I am interacting with on a daily basis, I would have to say that interactions and becoming more effective at conversations with other people is the absolute #1 area that they all want to get better at, and that none of them feel like they're good at. It is something that requires ongoing practice and cultivation and focus and attention so that we can continue to get better at it on a daily basis. But it is by far the #1 area that I always hear that people want help. They desperately want help to be able to improve and to develop in this area. So let's talk about what managed conversation is all about. What we have here is, we'll talk about having a working definition of managed conversation and throw in our weaving words, which of course we have to talk about in every single domain that we're covering. So let's do this. Okay, manage conversation. What is manage conversation? Well, first of all, manage conversation No surprise there, is it? Managed conversation is about cultivating conversation. But let's talk about what that means when we say conversation. Conversation is about creating a dialogue. It isn't just one way. A conversation takes at least two people. It's about creating a conversation that includes people having an open and free space, if you will, to be able to express their thoughts and their feelings and their ideas and what's going on with them. So managing conversation is all about how we cultivate that, how we put into place certain practices and certain approaches in certain ways so that we can develop that and get better at it. So when we think about what managing conversation is, we're talking about it being an exchange. It's an exchange of thoughts, of feelings, of ideas, of what's going on. And ultimately, there's a message. It's about conveying and receiving message. What I find is that this exchange part is an area where some people struggle because they're not sure how to go about exactly cultivating that exchange between people or groups or teams. And also to convey message, for them to convey message. I know I really pay attention to what it is, the message that it is that I'm trying to convey whenever I do trainings or have interactions and conversations with people. Not only is it about conveying message, but just as important, and perhaps more importantly in some cases, it's about being able to receive and to get a message that's coming to you as a manager and as a leader, and finding ways to clear out space so that we are able to comprehend and to hear and to get that message that others are trying to send to us. So this is what managing conversation is about first and foremost. It's about cultivating conversation that has to do with exchanging and conveying and receiving message. The second part of managing conversation is all about how we create connection. How do we create connection? Conversation is one of our weaving words, and within this particular domain, so is the word connection or connecting. Connection is so essential when we're talking about managing conversation. But have you really thought about what that might mean in this particular scenario? When we're talking about connections, what do connections do? Well, connections help link things together. They link things together in a way that allow them to be stronger. So the connecting part of conversation is about how we link together our ability to be effective at conversing with people in a way that strengthens the conversation. It builds it up. Connecting is also about linking together so that it makes things easier. It creates more efficient and easier access and pathways for communication. So as we're focusing on creating connection, we're talking about finding ways to be able to strengthen and to make the communication process more fluid and more efficient. So when we talk about creating connection, we're talking about linking and strengthening as it relates to the conversation. How do we find ways to build up our effectiveness at having those conversations and creating conversations? We're also talking about creating connections that have to do with the relationship. So whether we're talking about the relationship as it pertains to maybe a one-on-one relationship that we are having with someone in a work situation, it might be relationships that have to do with teams or groups. So it can be one or more people. But what we're really talking about is connecting in a way that tends to build up, to strengthen, to deepen, and to grow the relationship. And as we're able to get better at creating the kinds of connections that link together and strengthen our conversations, and that grow, develop, and deepen our relationships, then we are able to have conversations with people that get us better results, that help us to be able to make progress toward that vision and to get on the path to move forward and create that future. So these are the first two areas that have to do with managed conversation. So connection is our second weaving word that has to do with managing conversation. Now, one of the other areas that has to do with managing conversation is one that says, it isn't just about the conversation. It's not just the mechanical part of the conversation. How do you learn how to do better at listening and speaking, responding? It isn't just about the connection, though that's very important. It's how all that is done as well that makes a difference. So the third aspect that we're talking about when we're saying reflecting, managing conversation, it has to do with reflecting our authentic, you might have guessed it, self. It reflects our authentic self. I have found that some of the traditional management and leadership development programs or offerings or mindset is about, let's see, you need to be better at doing this as a leader and acting this way as a leader. And here's the style that you have to use when you're in this situation, and here's how you have to be in this situation. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about finding ways to be able to express ourselves in an authentic way as we're having these conversations. So what you'll find is when we start going into more detail about what's in the foundational concepts in Manage Yourself, and certainly when we get to the coaching call and I start showing you ways to practice this, you'll see more about what I mean when I say we're going to be finding ways to engage in conversations that reflect our authentic self. Because that's really, nobody can be a better you than you, and no one can be a better me than me. At least I haven't found anybody that can be a better me than me, or even who wants to be a me. But I digress. It's about reflecting your authentic self. Now, you might recall in our discussions last week, we talked about, as you're learning how to cultivate a better understanding of yourself in the Manage Yourself domain, I showed you this picture about the person, the painter, who is looking in the mirror to see the reflection, and that is from that reflection painting the picture that is presented to the world. And it's a great representation of who this person really is. So this person is really reflecting in an authentic way what they see, who they really are. It's genuine, it's in alignment. That's what we need to be doing. We need to be making sure that what we are projecting and what we are painting and what we are expressing in our conversations and interactions are from our authentic self. And I'm going to show you how to do that as we go further along. So, cultivating conversation, creating a connection, having to do with conversation and relationship that reflects our authentic self. And then finally, we're doing that in ways that help produce purposeful, you might have guessed what this is, purposeful progress. That's right. We're all about progress. It's the first word of Progress to Success Management. We're about progress. We're about getting somewhere. So we're not talking about having conversations where you're just spinning your wheels. I know I've been in plenty of them where I felt like I spent an hour getting nowhere. We're talking about having conversations and creating dialogue and having interactions that produce purposeful progress. Now, what you'll see here that I have put down to help our create a way to understand this better is what I call the purpose and progress loop. So there is a natural relationship between purpose and progress. So remember, when we talk about purpose, we're talking about something that's greater than ourselves. We're also talking about doing work and engaging in whatever activities we're engaging in that really tap into our greatest and highest self at that particular time in our life. So we're talking about purpose, and we're talking about progress that's consistent with it. So the big P is all about big purpose, and the little p, even though it's powerful, which is why I bolded it, is about progress. So what you might do is to think about it in the form that says, on the purpose side, this might be purpose at the individual level, our individual selves, but it gets broader and broader and broader. And if you're in a business or organization, it starts fanning out, so you're talking about purpose that also relates to up to the organizational level. So purpose, and the more we interact purpose with progress, it strengthens this loop, and they actually work to make each other stronger together. Stronger together. So when we're talking about progress, we're talking about progress as it relates to our goals. We want to be able to measure how we're tracking along. We want to be able to measure quantifiably and qualitatively how we are moving toward what we have said we are going to do, toward our goals. It's also about growth. So it's about how we make progress in growth as individuals, as growth as it relates to making progress through our career track, as growth as it relates to helping others be able to grow as people and as performers, and to be able to move and reach their own goals. So it's about helping ourselves progress, and it's also about helping others as well along their own journeys of performance and on their own path to success. So these are the main areas that relate to manage conversation. Manage conversation is about cultivating conversation in a way that creates connection, in a way that reflects our authentic self. It reflects our authentic self, and that has the end result of producing purposeful progress. So that's our working definition and our weaving words in this particular domain. So now it's time to talk about the foundational concepts that go along with managed conversation. And they have to do with what I call here interact with impact. Interact with impact. Would you like to learn how to interact with impact? You know, as I was saying when we first got started, that's one of the things that managers and leaders want to do more than anything is learn how to interact with impact. And interactions, that's how we get things done. It's those day-to-day, one-on-one or team or group sessions that help us move the bar. Interactions exist in the sphere of language. Interactions, you know, they're all about people working together, and they enable the accomplishment of work. So interact with impact, what does it do? Well, the concept of interact with impact is what it says here. It prepares you to confidently engage in conversations about work that produce purposeful progress. We're back to this purposeful progress thing, right? But interact with impact is how we get things done. Interactions enable the accomplishment of work. Interactions are about people working together in a way that changes them, in a way that helps them be able to move forward. So what are some of the specifics that have to do with interact with impact? What helps make those interactions happen with impact or significance or that leave a lasting impression, a good one? Well, there's several things that go along with it. The first, you know, interactions, they're about, you can look at them as like a chemistry experiment. So when we have interactions, what I bring into the interaction, thoughts, feelings, actions, my chemistry mix, and what others bring into the interaction make a difference in terms of what's going to happen with the interaction. And so as I bring more of my willingness to be open and to consider other perspectives, and as I bring in a mindset that's a growth mindset and one that says pursue progress, what I bring into the conversation, my attitude, and what the other person brings into the conversation, they interact in a way like a chemistry experiment that changes everything. That matters when we're talking about interactions, because the more of what I bring into the conversation that doesn't help the conversation, and the more the other person does the same, it always impacts the result that we get. So I like to look at it as being sort of like a you know, you see your beaker here with your chemicals and everything in here. So interacting with impact is like a chemistry experiment. So keep in mind, it's about bringing into the interaction our blend of thoughts, feelings, actions, attitudes that mix together and that make a real difference in terms of what we ultimately get in our result. The second thing about interacting with impact is that they tend to have a cumulative effect, like this. So our daily interactions that we have with people, day after day after day after day after day, the more we practice the concepts that I'll be teaching you about the interactions, the more we are able to improve our effectiveness and get better and grow in our interactions. Day after day after day after day, we start to see a cumulative effect in terms of us getting better and being able to have more purposeful progress conversations that get us the results that we need. So they tend to have a cumulative effect as we get better day after day after day after day after day after day after day. Okay. The third area of interact with impact, making sure we interact and that it has an impact, has something to do with what I call, and I didn't make this up, a competence-confidence loop. This applies not only to interactions, but this applies just in terms of learning and growing and getting better in general. the competent confidence loop, or the confidence competence loop. Remember, we're all about getting better and developing confidence in our interactions. So what this says as we develop our competence, so as we learn how to get better and as we learn how to engage in more of these interactions, we'll develop our ability to have more productive conversations with people that get us results, which in turn builds our confidence, which in turn encourages us to have more conversations, which builds our competence, which builds our confidence. And you see how this begins to work. So the more that we take action and learn from the actions that we take, the more confidence it builds, because the better we get at it. And even mistakes that we make along the way, even times when we have conversations where we leave and just go, oh, that was awful. I can't believe that it turned out that way. That was not anything the way I intended it to be. Even in those situations, there are learning opportunities for us to get better at them and to build our confidence and to build our competence, to build confidence and to build competence. I find this to be so effective, like I said, in many other applications within my own life, and have found that this is really helpful as I've trained and developed and coached other leaders in getting better at their interactions. So, the confidence-competence loop. The last thing I want to mention about interactions is this. When we're talking about interactions, the ones that really have the potential for true impact, they're the ones where we approach them from a perspective or a mindset of being committed to that interaction and being committed to practicing the principles and guidelines and rules that I'll be covering later on, versus what I call controlling the conversation or the interaction. Now, the challenge here is that many of us who have become successful as leaders have gotten that way or reached the heights that we have, because we are effective at making decisions and about getting things done and about pursuing progress and reaching the goals and the objectives. And what that means is that sometimes it can translate into wanting to control the conversation to what we want to happen and to take charge of the agenda, because face it, we're used to taking charge. Interacting with impact is about not controlling the conversation. It's about being committed to the conversation, being committed to purposeful progress in a way that allows for meaningful dialogue and exchange. So those are the areas that have to do with the foundation of interact with impact. It prepares you to confidently engage in conversations about work that produce purposeful progress. Now, in the next video, we're going to dive in more deeply, and I'm going to start talking with you about interactions and how they work under the hood, which means looking at our brain. So let's start getting ready for that video, and I will see you in the next video.